Good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Ross Virginia. I'm a faculty member in the Environmental Studies program, and it's also my pleasure to direct the Institute of Arctic Studies here at Dartmouth, which is part of the Dickey Center for International Understanding. And this has been a great day for all of us. We have John Houston with us. He's been here working hard all day long. He's here on behalf of several different interconnected and intersecting groups. First, Bob and Mary Rohr's ILEAD class on the Northwest Passage, and he spoke this morning about his connection to and his experiences there and leading people into the Northwest Passage on the ever-growing sort of cruise ship industry, but leading them through the history and the people and really ingraining, I think, a much deeper understanding of the North through that experience. We just came a few minutes ago from the Hood Museum, so the Hood Museum of Art and Kathy Hart. John has been here helping us understand some of the pieces that we have in our collection. Where did they come from? What do they mean? Who are the artists? And how we can better use that collection to understand the people and cultures of the North. And now here we are once more. We're going to see some of his work as a filmmaker and have a chance to see his work and talk to him and learn more about the North. So one of the great things I get to do is to take groups of students to Greenland each summer for several weeks. And we spent time in Nuuk, Greenland, and we met with a group called the Hunters and Fishers. And they represent people engaged in traditional hunting and fishing in Greenland. And this is the community that perhaps is most immediately threatened by what we see in the papers in the New York Times about changing climate and melting ice and rapid change and westernization and all these things. And it was really, I think, an eye-opener for us to begin to understand more closely how important the relationship between animals and wildlife and animals as food really is to the identity of people, to their language, to their culture, and to the aspirations that they have for their future and for their children. So I think it's really a special opportunity today for us, and particularly those of us who have been to Greenland, to have John here today to continue in that exploration. John Houston's from Canada. He grew up there. He grew up learning and speaking Inuktitut at a time when very few people of his generation and background had that gift and that way of connecting to people. He came from a very creative and special family. His father is an eminent artist, filmmaker, writer, and you'll see it very clearly had a direct influence, and John shares the gift of his father, James. What happened during this period of time was a realization that there was this amazing collective experience of seeing the environment through art and through the creation process of using materials to talk about and explain the relationships between people and animals in particular. And James Houston and then John helped foster the growth and development of really the Inuit art community in Canada during a period of several decades. And I think, as we heard at the museum today, I think really what it was involved was sort of an unleashing, if you will, and gentle support of this creative culture that was there and was looking for and finding new ways to express itself. And I suspect that John sees perhaps his greatest accomplishment, or when you take joy in, is through the creativity and the friendships you have with all those artists that have developed through time. Well, in this process, John became interested in film as a mechanism for communicating and sharing this experience of the North. And I think, as you'll see, particularly in the question and answering, it's not just film, it's really storytelling. John is a master storyteller about the people and the place of the North. He's been making films for 40 years, you say. You've got experience in the industry, if you will. And some of these are directly produced and looking at Inuit. Others are more engaged with the film industry in Hollywood. He's done lots of work. He's had a very important piece of directing and shaping of the film Never Cry Wolf. He writes, he's involved in arts and filmmaking. And so it's just a fantastic opportunity for us to have him here today. As I say, we've worked him very hard. What we're going to do is John's going to introduce his film, Diet of Souls, and it's actually sort of the third piece of 3 films, actually. And if I can do something right now, I encourage you when you leave here is go online and look for these films and find these films. We have copies of them here at Arctic Studies, and see these films. You're going to see a piece of a much larger body of work, and I hope it whets your appetite to go back and see more about what this is truly about. Following the film, then we'll have ample time for some questions and discussions. The film's about 45 minutes long, so let's get to work here. John likes to work. He's worked all day, so please join me in a very warm welcome for John Huston.
Thank you so much, Ross. Thanks for having me down here, and thanks to Mary and Bob Rohr, who are friends of mine from traveling through the Northwest Passage together. And it's great to meet our new friends, and Jed and Perry's not here, I guess, but Jed, who are our hosts. It's just been really wonderful here. And as I said to Mary when I was coming down, she was saying, well, we've got quite a few things planned, but we don't want to kind of overwork you. We want to put this period, like a rest period in here and a rest period in there. And I said, I don't come to rest. I've got lots of places I can rest without having to, drive down here from Nova Scotia to rest. So I enjoy coming and I enjoy sharing. And for some of you, I'm seeing the faces of some of you we've pretty well spent the day together, haven't we, at these various different events, and it's interesting because it's a vast subject or pool of ideas, and you can't get at it in any one way. So it's been really great for me to be down here and to be able to go at this in some different aspects, different facets, which start to reveal the truth underneath. The almost 40 years in filmmaking, my goodness me, that you mentioned, is yes, next year will be my 40th year in film, since I started as a coffee boy for Paramount Pictures up on Baffin Island for the film The White Dawn, was my father wrote the novel, and then Paramount adapted into a film, as directed by Philip Kaufman, and so on. It was a lovely a film I really love, from a story I really love. But that sort of got me going in thinking, wow, that this is one of the great ways to communicate, and I've kind of followed that for quite a bit of time. That was a period of quite a few years, 25 years or so, helping other people to interpret realize their vision, kind of like holding the ladder while someone paints their masterpiece or something. And there's great learning and there's great satisfaction in it. And then you reach a certain point. It's probably true in the life of anyone who's done this. You hit this point where you think, hey, what about me? What if I wanted to tell a story? I've held the ladder faithfully and held the lantern for so many of these storytellers, and I just wonder, if I wanted to tell a story, would I get that kind of support? And I switched. I changed, made some changes, and went to try to make a film of my own. I wanted to make a film about the Inuit and my parents, and that very special collaboration that led to launching something which is now known as Inuit art, and that would be my first film. A personal, very, very personal film on a much smaller scale than some of these big Hollywood things and so forth. And I'm glad to say I got all the support I could ever have hoped for. And some of these people, I worked hard for them, and they said, "Oh yeah, look, we'll help you. We'll do all sorts of things for you, whatever you want." And it was very, very, very gratifying. And so 12 years of that, really, of doing 6 of my own films, kind of 2 years each. And now I'm taking another turn. I'm back in Hollywood. We're doing a Civil War feature with director Ron Maxwell, and I'm co-producing it with him and stuff. So that's quite involving. And I guess what happens is that each of these things is it's a different aspect. Whatever you do, you just learn more, and you just keep sort of stepping forward. It's just pieces of the puzzle. It's like today there's not Polaroids, right? Nobody uses them or thinks about them anymore. But when you think about, like, how a Polaroid picture used to take shape, and it was always a little bit of a mystery, and you watched how it sort of came into being in front of your eyes. Well, for me, life's a little bit like that. I don't really understand it. I just kind of sort of follow instinct. And it's like a Polaroid picture. I guess when it's finally completely visible, I'll die, right? I suppose, right? That'll be it. When everything will be known. But in the meantime, it's quite fascinating to see how it all sort of comes up. And this was Diet of Souls. I don't want to go on too long in the way of an introduction. And something people have noticed sometimes when I'm introducing films is I don't talk about the film. Kind of weird. I don't talk about the film because I feel that if a filmmaker did his or her job really well, that should be enough. You should be able to switch it on and watch it and switch it off, and there should be enough information there for you to really understand what's being said. So if I start today saying, well, what I'm really trying to say here is, you say, well, yeah, well, you should have put that in the film. So I'm not really going to do that. But there are just a couple of comments, I guess. I grew up on documentaries. Everybody in Canada did. I don't know about you folks here, but Canada has a proud history. It's a British history and the Canadian history of the documentary film, right? And I can sort of hear them in my head. And when I was about maybe 8, 9, when I was 9 years old, and my brother was 7, we used to do mockumentaries. I got a tape recorder about this big, a reel-to-reel, a tiny, I think it was called an Elco, if that makes sense, ELCO, if that's sort of coming in memory. Maybe I see a head nodding, maybe it really was. And it was about this big, blue and gray little thing with these little tiny reels that went reel-to-reel, and I owned this thing, and a little condenser microphone this big that went with it, which I thought was extremely high-tech at the time. It might even have been. And my brother and I would get, when we were, maybe on a rainy day or something like that, we'd gather around this microphone and tape recorder. And we would do these Arctic documentaries. And because we just grew up on these things, and you'd have this voice. It would be a very British voice, a sort of that sort of that Oxbridge kind of accent, as they call it, and that sort of pan-British posh accent we'd try to do. And then you'd have all the various sound effects that came in and all that kind of stuff. And I kind of directed them. So I was really, directing when I was a kid in a way. It was maybe audio stuff. And we'd be kind of hunched over the microphone. And my brother and I would both start off, we'd do this sort of the interference-y sounds of trying to do the wind. And it's great. If 2 people can do the wind, you can do a lot of interesting things. But it would be sort of like, you'd go like, one of you might do something like that, and the other one would do the bigger gusty kind of sound. So if you have 2 people, you can make an amazing kind of like an audio kind of thing. But anyway, we'd be doing stuff like that. And then at a certain point, one of us, I'd probably, indicate my brother or something like that. And while we were recording, then he would start doing the sort of distant sounds of the dogs coming along, like, oh. Something sort of like this would be going on. And then the other person would have to be, you'd have to have the stern senior Inuit hunter type guy who would be like, trying to correct the course of the dogs or whatever, right? So he'd go, "Whoa, or something like that, and so we'd have put these little pieces together like that. We knew the pieces very well. And then at that point, while all that stuff was going on, I'd have my brother would be trying to do, he did more work than I did. He would be trying to keep that all alive. He'd do a little bit of dogs, he'd do a little bit of wind, he'd do a little bit of, he was trying to keep that soundscape kind of going. Today you'd sample that stuff or whatever, but this is a long time before any of that. So while that stuff was all going on, I would start the narration, and it was sort of a mock kind of a narration, and it would be something I can't remember exactly. It would be like, since the dawn of time, these funny little nut brown fellows have been eking out an existence in this, the least hospitable of all human environments, or something, sort of along those kind of lines, right? So it would add up to kind of a pretty good little radio show, and not so different from what we grew up on. So one day I was going to try to make my first documentary film. And I suddenly got all humble. I'd been kind of, mocking them when I was a kid and stuff. And suddenly like, whoa, wait a second, how do you do this, right? And somebody was telling to me, well, it's really simple. Here's how you do it, and you got to explain this. And when the Inuit are speaking, when the elders, you want to get a little bit of a feeling of them informing the piece. So you film them a little bit and so on. But the convention is you're going to turn their sound down, like the elder's going to start to speak. And you get a couple of seconds of that, so you get a little bit of color, like they've got a colorful sounding language. You hear their language. And then you kind of ease that down to very low. So underneath, you can sort of hear them kind of mumbling away. You can't hear what they're saying. And then you talk. You come in or get the British narrator or get somebody who will, with authority, tell you in English what they're saying. So I said, no, I won't do it. I said, I made fun of that when I was 9. I can't start doing it seriously now in my advanced, like this many years later, I can't do it. So I said, I tell you what I will do. Every time an elder speaks, they will speak in their own language at full volume, and we'll subtitle it. So if anybody here doesn't enjoy subtitles, I'm really sorry, but that's how we do it. And the reason that that's so important is I wanted a kind of a bonding. There's a breakage between the elders and the young, the two generations, like the grandparents and grandchildren. There's been a kind of a severed ties a lot between them. We had a lot to do with that when we pulled the kids out and we told the what are now their grandparents, we said that they did not have teacher certificates. So they were not authorized to teach the kids, and we were going to teach their kids. And so instead of the lessons of how to drive dog teams, we brought a primer which says, see Dick and Jane, see Spot run. I got handed one when I was a kid. I thought, I wonder what this has to do with this life that these guys are trying to get ready to live. And so we have some responsibility in that. And so here are the young people trying to figure it all out. And I thought, well, they're trying any number of ways to try to figure the thing out. And I thought, well, if I went and talked to the elders and I have speak their language in the old way kind of, and we can really talk. And I thought if we could communicate with that and you could hear their actual real words, and then plus the subtitles for the young Inuit people who some of them can really speak the language and some less so. The ones who speak it less so could read the subtitles and everybody could kind of understand that. So that's what I've tried to do. And I guess that's the one thing I will say about the film, other than the subtitle. And it's great here because you've got a wonderful room where each seat is elevated, in a real theater style. The subtitles are low, and it's awful sometimes when it's all flat. You end up behind somebody else, and you can't see the subtitles behind their head. But here it's really good, so thanks for that. And the one thing I wanted to say about the film itself is that I had to make this. There's a lot of stories that one could tell, and I started to think about it. Does anybody here collect beach pebbles? Does anybody really like, those where you walk along a beach and you find these great pebbles? Okay, yeah, so I'm one of those. And so I walk along a beach and I find this pebble that's amazing, and I pick it up and I have it in my hand, and then I find another one and another one until I've got more pebbles than I can actually hold. And I start thinking, I'm going to have to make a couple of choices here, unless I want to, get out a backpack or something. So then I look through them and I put a few down and pick up a few more, and it's a constant kind of a sifting process. And one day while I was in the middle of doing that, it hit me, wow, that is the process. It's like when I'm trying to think of what story I might want to tell, it's as if there are many stories that one could tell. There are many stories one could tell, and then there are quite a bit smaller a number of stories that you really should tell. And then it comes down to maybe one story or a very small number of stories that you must tell. And that's a sort of a process that I have to go through of. It's like turning over with these stories, and what led to this story is turning over these kind of beach pebbles, these ideas, and sifting them and looking at them and sifting them, and finally kind of with great regret throwing this one away and throwing that one away. I couldn't throw this one away. It sort of got in under my skin. When I was a kid, my mother and father used to read Knud Rasmussen, the Fifth Thule expedition, and they read that stuff to me when I was like a baby or something, so it was a little bit different, these anthropological texts. And And one of the things was this: there's this idea. There was a shaman named Ivaluartuk in Igloolik, and in 1921, it might have been early 1922, Knud Rasmussen was going through there, and this was a great time because the missionaries hadn't gotten there yet. He asked them. He said, "Have the missionaries been here?" They said, "We don't know. What are they like?" And he said, "Well, they have big long robes. They have big long black robes, and they have big furry white beards." And the Inuit in Igloolik said, yeah, we saw them, but they didn't stop here. We saw them from a distance going by, but they didn't come into our area and stop." So Knud Rasmussen got there before everything got, the big gag order went over everybody to never tell them anything. And he was interviewing shamans, and they'd say, "Yep, I'm a shaman." There was no shame about it or anything. And this shaman named Ivaluartuk said to him there's a long, beautiful speech about humans' relationship with animals and with the land and everything. It's amazing. And one little part of it just got under my skin, and this was this beach pebble that I couldn't throw down. And in the thing it says, he's trying to explain life to Rasmussen, and he says, "Here's our life." And in one part of it he says, this is obviously in translation, but Rasmussen was a very gifted translator, and he says, "The great peril of our existence lies in the fact that our diet consists entirely of souls." Okay, a diet of souls. What does that mean? What does it mean, a diet of souls? And that simple little thing, it was like the little, the pearl, the little piece of grit, the little bit of volcanic grit that gets into an oyster, and after a long, long time it produces a pearl. Well, it'll be for you to judge whether this is a pearl or not. It's not for me to say. But it was this little thing that got under my skin, and it bothered me until I thought, I have to make this journey, go meet the elders and ask them, what does it mean to take responsibility? You live in the world, and if you recognize that the other beings in the world are non-human persons, these animals are persons, and they have the same kind of status as a human. And then if you have to kill them because that's all you've got to eat where you are, what does that mean in life? And so I went and asked that question. I'm just going to hit play now, and I guess the lights are going to go off and stuff, and we can talk about it after. Thank you very much. And I thought we could open it up to a few questions or comments about really anything, really. It's a whole world up there. Yes?
I was intrigued about the willingness to speak about shamanism, and I wonder if this is because you have a close relationship with these people and they trust you and are willing to be open about that. Even just the existence that, yes, we know it's still there, but no one talks about it. So if you could just speak a little bit about your experience and hearing about that or asking about that.
All right, did everybody hear the question? No. Okay. So it's a question about access, really, in a sense that the people seem to be speaking very freely about these subjects, which I've mentioned on a few occasions today have been forbidden subjects. And is it a matter of trust? Are they kind of giving this stuff because we know each other, or why? How come? And it's a very perceptive question. I think it's a combination of a bunch of things. I do hope some trust has been built up, and with each film it has helped. Like, I'm from up there and speak the language and stuff, so those are some good things. And by the time this was the third film and people had seen the first two, they get up north, they get televised like all the time, all across the Arctic. So when I'm coming into a community, often people say, "Wow, you were on TV last night." I said, "Well, which one was it?" "Oh, well, it was the fourth one," or whatever. So that has really helped. And people start to think, at first some of the people are thinking, maybe I'll hold back, maybe I won't say anything. And then they see that some of the other people are speaking. Like, among esteemed elders, some of the most esteemed elders in the Arctic are in this particular film. It's like a who's who almost of some of the great elders. And one of them, the man Samson Huinanna, who's got the quite long beard, and he's the one who said, "I'm only alive because I've obeyed these. The only reason I lived long. I think your life gets shortened if you disrespect the old laws, and I'm an old guy, and the only reason I got to be old is because I didn't disrespect them," something like that. Well, he was became the key elder when I went to make Kiviok, the film after this, and I thought he's one of the wisest and most knowledgeable about that ancient story, which was like a kind of secret Bible, unknown kind of Bible story in a way. And I went around the Arctic trying to research that, and a lot of people were a little quiet about Kiviok. That's the fourth film's called Kiviok, and they were kind of clammed up about Kiviok. And it was great. I went to Baker Lake and got extensively interviewed Samson Huinanna, and he spoke, I was going to say without a break, but I mean, we'd take little breaks, to change we were doing the research on videotape, and then we did the thing, we filmed it after, and he basically told the story for 7 hours. It was like as if, you went back into ancient Greece, and you met a guy called Homer, and he started, telling you a story, and it just came tumbling out of him, and this is what it was like. I just felt incredibly honored to be able to witness and record this. And he's the one who said, he turned and he looked at me and he said, in the middle of all this, he stops and looks at me and he says, "You know what this story is, don't you?" And I said, "I rather hoped you'd tell me. That's why I'm here. So what is it really about?" And he said, "This is our secret Bible." And so I thought, okay, I'm going to treat it like that. Just imagine if you were sort of wandering around back, a couple of thousand years ago, and you stumbled upon this great story, the Bible, and you thought, wow, I got to do something with this. It felt like that. And when I went to the other communities, people would say, "Oh, Kivio, yeah, And they're trying to figure out how much they're going to tell you they remember. Like maybe they remember the story or maybe they don't, kind of depending. So I learned to jump in early, and I'd say, "Well, Samson Huinanna was very informative on the subject." And they go, "No way. Samson, you were talking with Samson?" "Oh, yeah. That's 7 hours. 7 hours he told the story of Kivio." And I got the feeling he had more. At the end of 7 hours, he said, "That's every single thing I know about that story." And then there was a guy, Gideon Kautjuak, who said, "Well, you shouldn't really talk about these things." I said, "No, I know. He said, "Well, Samson, 7 hours, huh?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I probably know 7 hours about Kivio." He said, "Why don't you come around? How about tomorrow morning? You're going to have your camera ready tomorrow morning? I'll talk to you tomorrow." And so it sort of steamrolled in a way, in that kind of way, where gradually people were saying, well, if she, and then Annie Peter Lucy was another one, that Annie Peter Lucy, she started off, she said, "Oh, so Samson sent you," kind of thing. And she said, "Well, I've got a lot that I can tell you." And then she started getting a hold of some of the other people and saying, "It's a shame if you're left out. It's a shame if you're left out of this." And only today, as I'm talking with you folks right now, do I fully understand what she meant. Just even as I'm talking, I just kind of got it. It's a journey, right? Because they're all dead. All of these elders have passed. The last one, Aupilarchuk, was the one who talked about how you had to place the bear looking at woman's things if it was a female bear and all that sort of thing. He died last week. And so I now understand when Annie was getting a hold of people, I thought, whoa, she's really helping me to put this thing together. She wasn't helping me to do anything, right? I'm kind of insignificant in this. It's really an exercise. Like a lot of people, you think of filmmaking as perhaps an exercise of the ego. In this particular case, it's like an exercise of ego extinguishment in a way, because you're in the middle of this thing and you realize these stories were around, thousands of years before I came along, and they're going to be important thousands of years after I'm gone and stuff. And so you just sort of feel like you're an instrument, and you're here to help record. You have certain skills and abilities, and you're here to help. And then when Annie starts to get a hold of people and say, don't be left out, you should be in this film. And at the time I thought, wow, she's helping me to make my film. And today I realize, forget any of that, right? She wanted them to have their say. And they did have their say, and they're gone now. That was the window, that was the chance. Any other questions or comments? Yes.
I'm curious, you said some of those people were esteemed across the culture. And I just think of them as being in small groups and very isolated, maybe the traditional people. How do they achieve that sort of fame?
How do they achieve that fame? That's great. There is travel. There's more travel than you'd think. There's an elders council, which, Aupilatuk, several of the people in there were members of the elders council. So people would travel. There'd be a small budget for that to get them. They'd all get together in one area. And when they all got together in one area, they would contribute. They'd brainstorm and contribute their ideas. And people would go away thinking, wow, the person who really led this, morally, they wouldn't be in a leader position exactly. It's a kind of a consensus-based thing. But among these equals, there was one person who they would look to for kind of leadership, let's say. And then that person, you would start to realize that they were among esteemed elders. This would be a very highly respected person. And right now you can see you could Google Mariano Aupilatuk, who passed away last week, and you'll say that they're talking about they're preparing the funeral for this most respected person and so forth. And as you see the language of what people are saying about them, and on Facebook and everywhere, you'll see they touched a lot of people. Mariano Aupilatuk, who I'm thinking about a lot right now, he was taken down to New York City for some kind of an elders experience kind of a thing or whatever. You never quite know what these things are. And he was walking along with this little contingent that he was with. A lot of them were younger people as well, these Inuit. And there were the people who were managing them and walking along this New York street. And they went past, there was a subway grating, one of those with the hot air coming up from the subway. And there was a homeless person, a guy with a guitar. And this homeless person was like warming himself over the subway grate, and he was trying to bum a little money and play the guitar and so forth. And everybody was being rushed along. They had to get somewhere for lunch or whatever. And Mariano stopped. Now, of course, he's a unilingual elder. I mean, it's a scary. When I heard about that, he kind of stopped and got behind the group. My instant thought is like, oh my, how's that going to kind of play out, And he stood there, kind of trying to relate, although he doesn't speak English or any other language but his own, trying to sort of relate to this homeless man. And somebody came running back to get him and said, no, come on, you gotta, don't do that. We have to go to the next thing, and don't fall behind, and don't get lost and everything. And he went along with it. He said, okay, you're right. I don't want to get lost and stuff. And he went along with the group. And when he got back to the Arctic, he had this kind of like a sort of a crisis, like a sort of a moral crisis about the fact that he didn't follow his own, the courage. He didn't have the courage of his own. He wanted to stop and really relate to this homeless man. And he felt that he'd kind of, just given in and gone along with the group and stuff. So he composed this epic ballad, like an epic drum song. And in this song, he sort of speaks to the homeless person and sort of says like it's all my fault, kind of thing. Like I walked away and left him alone there and all that. And the Governor General of Canada heard about the song for the homeless man, and she asked if he could perform it for her. And so he was flown down to Ottawa with his drum, and he performed the song. And then shortly afterwards, Peter Zofsky, I don't know anyone who's ever listened to Canadian radio. Peter Zofsky was sort of ruled the airwaves there until his death a few years ago. And he was somewhat of a friend of mine and a Arctic buff and so on as well. Big push for literacy. It was a big push for literacy. And he emailed me. And he said, did I have the lyrics? This was again out of the blue, sort of another year later or something. Did I have the lyrics for the song for the homeless man that my friend Aupilatuk had composed because he wanted to publish them? So it's just a few ideas of when you wonder like how they get around, how the word gets around. It's like there are people very much like outside of the Arctic who are very touched by some of these things, and then they have circles of influence, and the whole thing kind of travels through like that. There was another, yes.
Is there anyone, you touched just very briefly on the traditional knowledge of the women. Is anyone doing for the women, the traditional women, what you've done for the hunters?
There's a little bit. There's the women's group, the Aldenite Video Group in Igloolik, and they do gather some material on video, which is quite interesting. I didn't really think of this as being like, in a way. I mean, I went at this particular subject. I didn't think of it as being like a male or female subject in the Arctic, like the hunt is. It's sort of everybody has to eat and everybody's kind of involved in it. But I understand what you mean, because a lot of the people who really knew the most, when we talked about, like, say, the spirit of the bear, I would be sent to like a fellow who knew, had been out hunting them and knew quite a bit through that. But it would be, there is so much more that there are other themes that would be very much more sort of centered on the women's special knowledge, and it would be great. I had one that I really wanted to do, which was actually in America. It was up in Point Hope, Alaska, and people talk about the whaling up there a whole lot. And I was reading, there's a book by a fellow, Tom Lowenstein, who had been up there quite a bit, and he's a poet actually and so on, but he had also written some ethnographic material there. And he was talking about how women have the wives of the whaling captains, the Inuit, whaling captains up there, the wives of the whaling captains have a mysterious relationship with the whale. Have you heard anything about? Yeah. And it's quite fascinating. And I interviewed a fellow over the phone, because they kind of wouldn't let me come up. They debated, they deliberated for a long time. Well, they had been kind of hit by sort of Greenpeace and whoever, people who had tried to exploit them, like come in and saying we're documentary filmmakers. As it turned out, they wanted to get some footage of the slaughter and use it to stop whaling, or any number of tricks, and so they were very wary at the time. So I just said to the fellow, listen, I just want to, can I talk to you over the phone? Let's just chat here. And he was the head of the whaling captains at that particular time. And I said, look, I've been reading some stuff, and I just got to kind of ground truth these things. And, for someone who's really a participant, a Aboriginal person and a participant in the hunt. And I understand about this thing of the mysterious relationship between the whaling captains' wives and the whales. Oh yeah, he said. Oh, that's yeah. I said, was that ever held to be true, or is that? Oh, that's true now. Oh no, he said, that's an everyday thing. And he said, we when the woman is under taboo, when they are out waiting on the ice, and they go out there and they wait for quite a long time. They wait at the edge of the ice with their umiak, and they wait for the whales to come. And you can't just rush out there at the last minute. You're waiting. It's a vigil. And while that vigil is going, the woman is under constraint that she has to wear, for example, wear loose-fitting clothing. She has to wear very comfortable clothing, nothing constricting, because the whale will feel it. If she's wearing tight, uncomfortable clothes, the whale will feel tight and uncomfortable. And she's supposed to eat really well, just eat really nice, relaxing, good comfort food, because the whale will feel comfortable and relaxed and welcomed. And she's not supposed to have stress. It's organized in advance that, during the time of the vigil, she's not suddenly going to have to deal with some crisis. It's all of that stuff is worked out to the best of everyone's ability in advance, so that she can have a very quiet, relaxed, stressful time at home. And apparently, if that doesn't happen, there's no whale is going to get caught. She is completely directly tagged. If that whale feels comfortable and respected and relaxed, it has been documented, all right, in Point Hope, that a whole bunch of whales come by. And you may have read about this. This is pretty compelling stuff, and I wanted to go up and capture this. A whole bunch of whales come by, and kind of slowly, and I don't know if you've heard about this part, one whale comes over and waits and gets killed. And the other whales, seeing that has happened and that contract has been paid, I suppose, they all move on. Okay, I wanted to be there. And I wanted to be in the house with the whaling captain's wife. I thought, that's where the action is. That's what it's about. And film a whale, get footage, whether I buy footage or I film it or whatever, but of whales moving in the water, the woman, the whale, the relationship. So I couldn't do it. They wouldn't allow me actually to go at that time. Eventually they said, you know what, we saw your film. It was about 8 months after I sent it, and then it was lost, and I sent it again, and it was lost. And the third time I sent it, they watched it. And they said, no, the whaling captains liked your film. They liked it. And he said, we can't commit to anything. We're so scared with, everybody's been working us over. We're so scared. But if you wanted to come up and bring your film crew, we could talk, and if we all got along, then, maybe you could do some filming or maybe not. Well, you can't go and raise $1 million and, just on the off chance that maybe people will let you film. It's like, whoa. So I just thought, yeah, that sounds great. Maybe another year or whatever. But there are ideas like that. That's another one that got to me, and it would be hard to let go of. I'd love to try to do that sometime. And that's a very, very, it doesn't sound like a women's story when you start, but it really is. Are we out of time?
I have one question.
Okay.
Not a question, a comment. I love the way you incorporated art that really was beginning to tell the story of their thoughts and everything. I thought that was absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
Where did you get that idea from to use art to tell the story?
Well, I guess I'll try to make it, this is sort of a brief answer. That's quite a big question. But as I was growing up, I saw that I grew up with people who did not share a language with the sort of the general, English-speaking populace. And it seemed to me that they were using art to communicate, that a lot of their culture became understandable to us through their art. So I guess I just always thought of the art as speaking. And yeah, and so I thought, like, there are times when anything you would say would kind of be too much. And one of the moments I hope it was one of the moments you liked, there's a sculpture that I filmed in the basement of the museum, of the Canadian Museum of Civilization, and it's a fellow skinning a seal. And we had him kind of rotating, and the lights playing off him as he's got his big ivory knife, and he's skinning the seal. And so that was this thing when they're talking about they get the seal, like Gino is out there and he shoots the seal and then he harpoons the seal. And then we just went to this piece turning and like the skinning of the seal. And I just thought at that point, I had a lot of footage. I kept rolling, and I have this footage of the seal being eviscerated and the bits of meat being taken out and being handed around. As I watched the film and I showed it to some people and stuff, it felt a bit strong. It was like a lot of guts and a lot of blood and so on. And I had to ask myself the question, does the story require that? Because I put in some, I'm not scared to put in, you could shoot a seal or whatever, but I'm not trying to bang you over the head with it. We should have just as much of it as we need, but any more than that, it becomes voyeuristic or something like that. So at that point I thought, you know what, we've got a whole other choice. If we're telling the story that we've killed the seal and now we're going to skin the seal, the art can tell that story more eloquently, and it turned out in a more acceptable way for that particular part of the picture. So there were other examples of that, but that's the one where I just thought, let the art speak. Thank you very much.
I would just like to finish by saying that all the time, and in many ways that John's connected with us, clearly this was just an introduction. John, introduction to community. We look forward to having you back to continue this style.
I'd like to hear that.
Thank you. That's great. Yes, you're already invited. Thank you so much. Thank you.